Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. It is the third day of Autodesk University, and I am here talking to you about all things construction technology. Today, we're talking about construction claims and contracts disputes, which I know most people get out of bed and that's the first thing they think about and they get really excited. So I'm really excited to just kind of dig into this narrative. And to tell that story today, I am joined by Sarah Keyte, the technical director from HKA, and Cliff Moser, the executive consultant of architecture, also from HKA. How y'all doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to learning a whole bunch from you. You both had a theater talk earlier this week, which I heard went wonderfully because, like I mentioned before, everybody gets fired up about contract disputes. But I think the good news here is we're going to talk about how to avoid this, how to sidestep some of these challenges, how technology really fits into the bigger picture. So some really cool stuff coming. But I've got one question that I didn't tell either of you that I was going to ask you. So buckle up. We're about to have some fun. I'm putting together a Digital Builder Podcast playlist. And so I'm curious, what is top of your playlist right now? Cliff, you got any particular music you listen to? Anything you're excited about right now?
Say like Frank Sinatra, but I'm not that old yet.
Hey, I'm a big fan. I'm a Frank fan, so I'll take it. Any particular song?
We do a Frank Sinatra theme. I got disputes on the mind.
I think this is the first time we've had anybody sing on Digital Builder too. So we're hitting milestones. We hit 100 episodes earlier this week.
I'm not American, so I didn't ever get to be a theater kid.
Yeah,
that's okay. Well, today is your day. Congratulations, Sarah. What do you listen to? What's top of mind for you in the music world?
Dad rock.
Dad rock.
Yeah, like Dire Straits.
Okay.
Like the Eagles, all the dad rock.
All right, so we're going to have Hotel California on the playlist. I don't know any Dire Straits songs, but we'll figure something out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of old Linkin Park, so if you really want to mix it up.
Wow.
All right, Cliff, we're gonna have a metal conversation after this episode wraps up. I like this. We've got a lot of cool stuff in the playlist here. So let's pivot back to construction because I think that's why most of these folks are here to hear both of you speak today, and we'll nerd about music a little bit later. I'd like to start at the top and get that 30,000 foot view of what the work you do at HKA really is and how it does tie back to the construction industry. Cliff, you want to get us started on that one?
I'm an architect. I've been around for a while, practicing for a while. I've been with HKA for a little over 2 years, and I focus on standard of care issues, which is those subjective words, phrases it focuses basically on architect standard of care. And I get involved in projects, building opinions, working for council typically. But we do remain independent. Council brings us on board typically when there's a claim that's brewing or they're trying to set something up for mediation. So my role is to dig into the documents and determine whether or not the architect and even sometimes the contractor and even the owner, fell below the standard of care in terms of the project requirements.
All right. So you're a bit of an investigator, to say the least.
Yeah, forensic. That's typically it. So I would be right up there with Sarah and looking at, being a forensic architect, digging into things.
I'm going to have to be nice to you then, as long as you dig into a past project that I worked on, just to make sure we're on the right terms.
Yeah, you got it.
Sarah, how do you fit into this whole narrative as far as your role in the work that you're doing at HKA?
So I am also on the expert witness side of things. So I either act as an expert witness or I'm assisting delay, quantum, or design experts such as Cliff. So that's actually how we met. So you gave me a call, said, hey, I've got this file in proprietary software. So we're seeing evidence change as well. So the world of expert witnessing is changing as a result of digital transformation.
All right, so don't delete your files, I think, is the undercurrent of what we're talking about here.
Records.
So I'd like to learn a little bit more about the life of a claim or a dispute. I think most people can kind of get a baseline assumption of what this looks like, but like, how does this transpire before it shows up in your inbox or your lap and you guys start doing your investigative work? Sarah, any thoughts on that one?
Well, we know what the common causes of claims and disputes are. So typically design change, incorrect design, changes in scope and variations.
Right.
And then occasionally workmanship defects and sometimes a mixture of these things. So on large projects, I think we were talking yesterday, every project we worked on in design construction had a claim, at least.
Right. Yep.
At least one. So no surprises here as far as how this kind of unfolds.
Absolutely. Everyone in the construction industry will see claims and disputes. But we as a BIM community don't like to talk about it because we spend so much time trying to prevent it. But actually, models make really good evidence. And the trail of breadcrumbs of who did what and when and why and how, that can be held in models. And same with ACC and other common data environments. The trail of breadcrumbs and the golden thread is in there. So that's something to look at.
I really like hearing that. And I know that folks out there, they can do a lot to prevent getting into this point. And also, I think there's a lot of work that can be done that if you do end up in a dispute, you've done all your due diligence. And so those conversations are a bit more streamlined and straightforward. I remember looking back and being part of a few, requests for equitable adjustments to the federal government and trying to figure out with the project managers and such, like, what happened? Where's your documentation? Do you have photographs? Whatever. And trying to compile this as a third party who wasn't a part of that particular project was a nightmare. And I was very new in my career, and so all of it was overwhelming. But I empathize with everybody who might be in a position where in a dispute because it's a stressful moment.
It is.
And being able to lean on certain documentation, I think, puts everybody in a much better place as they kind of dig in. I'm curious to hear a bit more about the tools that you tend to leverage when you are seeing folks either managing contracts disputes or claim disputes or managing their data to kind of navigate this process. So what does that look like? Cliff?
Before I started at HK, I was working for, probably about 12 years as an owner's rep on a couple of, for some hospital owners. So I was helping build hospitals. So I had to work on a regular basis with, what the requirements were in terms of the contract requirements for the projects, and also the engagement with the contractor, the architects, and most importantly, the agencies. So what we were always doing, and as an owner's rep, we were always ensuring that we had all the information in place to help manage that, because like Sarah had said, all the projects I've been on have gone to claims, and typically you try to mediate them toward the end of the job so you can close everything out before it actually gets to a dispute that requires arbitration and things like that. So the tools we use were just making sure that we captured all the information while the project was being put together. We identified what the contract requirements were, if they were as a BIM model was part of the requirements, or if it was all just that as a reference, and then what the communication between the all the project teams while the projects were being put together, all of that being captured. So we said in our presentation yesterday, we look at everything: PDFs, meeting minutes, RFIs. Hospital projects in California have tons of inspection reports. You look at that, you find out how many inspections have failed, how many things have transpired that way. And I've used all of that now in my role at HKA in terms of investigating, the projects that are going into claims or actually are into a dispute, to determine whether or not they'll be able to kind of take care of them prior to the mediation and hopefully before arbitration and litigation.
Yeah, I mean, the tools depend entirely on the evidence you're given. So if you're given models, Navisworks is typically a great way to investigate them. And then if you're given access to common data environments, then using that common data environment, exploring how files were, I've got claims on my desk about information management and how documents were managed. And that's the type of claim we didn't see a few years ago. So the evidence changing impacts the tools. I could say e-discovery, but it depends entirely on what we're doing. I mean, someone gave me access to an open space site. I don't know. Have you been over to the open space?
Yeah, familiar with open space. I've had a couple folks on from the program. They're doing some great stuff.
I mean, we're not paid to endorse them, but I just really like them. I think it's because like your records act as a time machine. So I actually don't need to get any other tools involved. That is a platform that has your records, right? And it's just it's such a one-stop shop for site records, right?
That's right.
I'm curious to understand a bit more about how many of these claims actually make it into arbitration or into a courtroom. Like, how does that typically unfold from an average project? I guess if you're handed a bunch of claims, like, do people manage to resolve them typically before we get to that point? And how rough is it if you do actually end up in a very escalated legal situation?
Yeah, I mean, most things settle out.
Yes, they do.
So litigation also isn't the preferred method of dispute resolution. So typically, especially in the UK and Middle East, Europe, we see contracts with multi-tiered dispute resolution clauses. So you'll have a duty to mediate, and then if that doesn't work, you have a duty to potentially arbitrate. And then that way you're resolving the dispute behind closed doors anyway, so shareholders aren't getting annoyed that the public's hearing about your dirty laundry being folded. But of course, arbitration has a bit of a dirty reputation, I think, in the last few weeks since Disney.
Oh, yeah. Signed terms and conditions.
Yeah, that was, I think when the woman had signed up for Disney Plus or something like 5 years prior. Yeah, it was a very sad situation.
Yeah.
They did it with Uber as well. That's awesome stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's what typically you see is counsel throwing anything against the wall to see what sticks, and then you have to kind of look at it, and that's where we come in, because again, as an independent expert, we're hired by counsel either to focus on a particular for or against case, but the counsel really wants us to be honest in terms of what we're seeing, and then we can go back to the counsel and say, that there's not really a claim here. This was all within the standard of care. There was no below the duty to standard of care. And in other cases, you look at it, and while you're digging in the files, and Sarah has an opportunity to work with things in real time. Typically, I get thousands of documents that are coming out of discovery that are just impossible to dig through. So just trying to find those breadcrumbs that tell that narrative of what happened, so you can start kind of putting things together. And once you start seeing things and seeing, this happened because, it's all down to human behavior. And this happened because, someone got snotty with answering an RFI, or in terms of responding to an RFI.
Don't email angry.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
There's a great case. There's a great case in the UK. I think Water Lily v. Mackay, and it was sweary, and you never send those emails.
Yeah, when I was working as an owner's rep, they'd have two team members that worked for the same team, and their offices were next to each other, or their desks. And they'd be yelling at each other in emails. I'm like, guys, stop.
Stop doing this, please.
Stop doing it, because in 5 years, someone's going to be looking at this going, what was going on here?
I think John Mulaney has a bit where he's like, you never want your jokes read out loud in a courtroom. And
so true.
He said his buddy had called him up. He's like, so some of those emails that you sent about my landlord in college, and it's like, okay. And I think that's a really great example of that, because taken out of context, even if you know each other really well or not, like, obviously, roasting somebody in email is not a great idea.
That was actually my first case. I was at a hearing because I was working as a construction manager, and a friend of mine who had worked with this contractor said, "Oh my God, if you guys hire these guys, you just replace the toilet paper and the porta potty with their schedule. That's how good." And so when I was being deposed, the counsel who was talking to me said, "We got to lay this out." I said, "You really want me to say that?" And then of course it went off to the hearing, and it was back before computers were just there, but it was basically an overhead with a sheet, and they read it out in court, and the whole courtroom just busted out laughing. It was like the judge was like, order. So I always remember that. That's why I go in and pull these people apart and say, stop.
Yeah, it's like, unplug the computer. Let's have a conversation about this. I've got some guidance. I mean, you're making it more and more obvious. Like, we don't want to end up in the courtroom. Like, I think all parties, regardless, are incentivized to avoid that, regardless of if there's an arbitration clause or not.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the cost associated with going to court or just awkward conversations like that, where you go, "Hey, remember this email I sent when I was incredibly angry?"
Yeah.
Well, we're going to read that in front of about 150 people now.
Sometimes though it's unavoidable. So if your client, for example, goes insolvent, you need to file a lien to get paid.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
Instances like that where actually, it's big in the UK right now because we've just had a major contractor, ISG, go under. You've heard about that.
Yep.
And the impact, the supply chain, they all now need to make those claims. And they may not have had a bad working relationship, but they're in the situation they're in. They have to think about their needs and their business.
Yeah, they have to make themselves whole, and that's understandable.
Exactly that. So the claims world isn't just people arguing. It's about protecting your business, and sometimes it's just simply people want to know how much they owe each other. It's a very factual that they're working together on multiple projects. They have a good working relationship. They just want an independent opinion sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not it's not always people at each other's throats.
Makes a bunch of sense. I appreciate you setting kind of the baseline for how folks can look into that. I'd like to lean a little bit into contracts, and I'm curious, what sort of contracts have you found that either improve collaboration or reduce the number of disputes that end up in your inbox?
You said something really good about this, about IPD.
The lean construction group has been really focusing, and because a lot of the projects I've been on in the last 20 years have been really big, expensive, very complex projects that last for years. The traditional design bid build is very adversarial because it pits the contractor against the usually it's a low bid. It pits the contractor against the designer. What has the architect shown? There've been a lot of adjustments along the way. They have like design build, and that is better. But as an architect and working as an architect, you kind of cut the architect out of that particular process. It's more kind of construction developed, because usually the architect in those cases is working for the contractor. What we see with a lot of projects is they do typically, if they not going to do IPD, they'll do a cost plus. So it'll be signed up for the contractor. The architect will be paid for the contract in terms of what they've developed in terms of the design drawings, and then the owner will pay the contractor the cost of the job set on invoices with a plus for the profit. And what that does is it makes sure the contractor gets paid on a regular basis, because they're actually submitting their invoices. It really supports that. But IPD is developed as I said, it's come out of the lean construction group in Northern California. Sutter Healthcare pretty much kind of initiated that. And what that means is the group comes together as a kind of a professional organization. Rather than having everybody at everyone's throat, they basically agree with a risk-reward concept. So they all agree to kind of play nice. And at the end of the day, if they've usually finished the project on time, they finished on a budget, then they get the rewards that are calculated. But also with the risk aspect, they all agree that if they need to make a change, they'll agree together to make that change, and that'll be helping them to mitigate the risk for all parties.
We see a lot of contracts in the UK, different types, like PPC 2000, partnering contract, NEC4 Alliance, and the contract clauses around things like collaboration, time bars, quick communication, they encourage certain behaviors, but at the end of the day, those behaviors can take place in a contract that still is designed to build. But it just depends, it depends how you set your project up, and quite often I think is the design finished, and where is the risk put? Is it put with someone who's not capable of managing that risk? Like, how is that?
If the design's finished, that's where I come in terms of looking at the standard of care. Was it incomplete? Was there a lot of changes as a result of the incompleteness, or things shown incorrectly as well?
Yeah, clients always want to, especially in the UK, they don't like finishing things off. They try and give it to contractors through what we call CDP, contract design portion, and it can be a bit of a mess, because you then have more scope interfaces between the architect. It's unclear sometimes what's falling into this person's contract, what's in that person's. Ultimately, we appreciate people have financial needs to to think about. So that, it may be cheaper going to a specialist subcontractor, maybe better because the specialist subcontractor knows their product.
Yeah, we do that a lot with delegated design. So you actually give a portion of the design to the experts who are the builders, and they do things like curtain walls and a lot of the systems like elevators are typically done this. They either call it delegated design or they do it as design build. So the experts, in that case, the elevator manufacturers developing. So
yeah, have you ever seen like a model where people have tried to mark up the scope interfaces though, and just like that's a really, I don't know if you've ever seen this. Okay, so you have this subframe, you've got the tile that goes on that. This person's in charge of the mastic.
I don't think so. I've not come across that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I'd
had
be
that a lot in other states where you have like 50 called multiple primes. So instead of the MEP being a trade partner to the GC, they're actually a prime contractor. So at the end of a month, you get 15 different pay applications, and then you have to go out and actually see if they've accomplished all of that. It was set up for fairness because they had a lot of GCs that would just use their same trade contractors over and over again, and it's still in place for a number of states where they do. It's state-funded work like schools and things like that.
yeah.
I'm definitely bullish on IPD or integrated project delivery myself as well. It's a very common thing on the West Coast in the U.S. especially. And I love that method, even if you don't have an IPD contract, like finding ways to share some of those risks and be a little less punitive towards one another.
We do a lot of IPD light, so it's kind of like a similar thing with cost plus. It's like
Diet
IPD. That's right. Diet IPD.
It's tough though. In the way the contracts are set up, I understand why folks are cagey with sharing their numbers and not being super transparent, because they have to protect their own margins and their own risk as well. And when the vehicles aren't set up in a way to enable them to do that, then of course they're not going to be as transparent.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
there's a culture conversation, I think, that underlies that.
And it all goes back to the design bid build, where everything is set up as adversarial, and trying to change that design bid build puts all of the risk on the contractor. And and the architect can basically say, hey, my design was finished, you just are building it wrong.
Yeah, this is your fault now.
Yeah,
the blame game becomes a little bit relentless at that point.
It does.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're interested in reading more about research, so the HKA have the Crux report, and we've got the latest issue just off the press, like hot off the press, hot to go. If you're interested in the different sectors, how disputes happen, and what the common causes are in each sector, each contract type, different districts, it's global.
Well, people have to make sure to check that one out then if they're really excited about this contract dispute conversation.
You said get up in the morning and just...
Yeah, that's what gets me up today. Every day I wake up and go, what claims am I going to hear about this morning?
I wouldn't say that, but actually, no one goes to work for free. We're all there because of a contract, right? Whether it's your employment contract or your work contract, your contract between the architects and designers. We're all here because of a promise or series of promises written hopefully down on paper. God, I hope they are. But sometimes they're oral contracts where I'll do that. Make sure you pay me though.
No, that's a big part of it. And everybody deserves to get paid for the work that they're doing too. And it's unfortunate when you see folks who are trying to bend the contracts in ways to sidestep that and avoid. They go, you didn't document this perfectly, so we're not going to pay you for it, kind of thing. And that's unfortunate.
That's sad.
And you hear about it more often than I would like too. So there's a lot to be said about the relationships and maintaining them in this industry. And it's a very large, but also very small industry. I think once you start burning those relationships and your specialty contractors, you can only do that so much before people don't want to work with you, or you get the not nice GC price compared to the market price. That's true. That markup is not small if they're not particularly interested in working with you.
Yeah, or I think we were hearing from some contractors yesterday that they are the guys that go in and fix when someone else has accepted the lowest price, and then halfway through the project they realize they can't do it, and then they walk
drop
off.
tools and go away.
Yeah, they get terminated, and then these other guys are a bit like I described them as in Pulp Fiction, the guy who comes in the suit.
The cleaner.
What's his name, Wolf? Yeah, that guy. Them as a Middle Eastern contractor, that's what they're doing. And it's incredibly sad because, if you had a sensible conversation from the start, sensible budgets, time, program, costs.
Yeah. I've seen that firsthand. I mean, when I was still living in Dubai and working on projects in the Middle East, there was a lot of hard bid firm fixed price projects that were going on, and folks were bidding on them like they were still cost reimbursable. And all those companies went out of business. It was like, okay, you get a year in and you go, hey, we need more money because change conditions. And the government just went, no.
Sign the contract.
Yeah, this is what you get. And that's a uncomfortable moment, but a reality and a hard lesson to learn, I guess, when you go down that path. I'd like to learn a little bit more about your day-to-day and your roles. And can you tell me what's the most frustrating thing that rolls through your inbox when you're sitting in a claim? Like, what shows up and you just go, gosh, like, please stop doing this, other than the nasty emails or whatever that might be.
Easy, right? When a client has a good claim but just has no records, you can't make those records. They need to be factual, contemporaneous, hopefully digitized records.
Yeah. And then the other thing is if you're trying to find those records, but you're just been delivered millions of documents.
No naming convention.
No naming convention. Typically it's all
V1,
discovery.
final, V2,
Well,
final.
You get that.
Dave underscore final.
But the worst part is you get thousands of responses to meeting minutes and stuff like that. Yes, I'm going to attend, and there's that comes in multiple, because with the discovery just grabs everything from every particular participant.
We're going to drown you in documentation.
Or things like, we were talking about yesterday in our talk about how a photo, you think you're doing the right thing, but actually, if I can't tell years down the line where that photo is taken, it's not date stamped, I don't know who took it, what agenda they had when taking it. If you have a project with, say, 500 bathrooms and you take a picture of a toilet stall, how am I supposed to know which one this is?
Yeah.
And I've heard of examples of people reusing that same photo from different angles to say we've completed certain scopes of work, and then when you finally show up and go, you go, oh, only one bathroom was built, and then this contractor disappeared into the ether. You go, okay, well, you didn't build 500 toilets, you put in one, and then sent me 500 photos of it.
Fraud.
different times of the day. So
Different people working on it. Yeah, exactly. Different outfits. Take a Hawaiian shirt on.
Yeah, it's such a good point, though, as far as just making sure that your documentation is thorough enough and credible enough, because it's easy to sidestep and dance around things, especially if you're managing a project in a really remote environment.
Yeah, we had a gentleman who showed up, but they asked the question at the end of our session yesterday. I said, we have a photograph taken of this installation, and it failed. And he said, but when our installation shows that it was signed off and was appropriate and everything else, what do we do in that particular case? And it's like, well, you have that documentation. You just have to really rely on it and ensure that you back it up with the work that was done during that time before and after, and kind of memorialize it as it was put in. Because things are always going to fail at some point, and you just need to kind of plan for it.
Yeah, and people leave businesses, so you have those records that you think you could put together today, but unless you actually write them down.
That's true. I mean, the amount of turnover that you might experience in a project, or
especially when you're in financial distress, right?
Yeah, people are abandoning ship if a project's not going well, and then suddenly everybody goes, "Well, how was this built and what happened?" And every single person that touched that no longer works there.
Exactly.
You've got a much more challenging request for equitable adjustment to put together, which is kind of where I was sitting when I was in that world, where those project managers and executive team had all left the company because that project had either ended or we had to drop tools and things changed. I can't remember the full circumstance, but it was kind of a he said, she said, because the person that really truly was there in the moment wasn't there to tell me what really happened.
Yeah, get those witness statements written down.
Because we'll have projects that are like 7 years old, and you've got turnover every 6 months for a lot of these trade contractors that are not the contractor itself, but the union members have went off to another job, and just trying to identify. You'll have people say, oh yeah, that was so-and-so, he was working on that section of the building, and where is he now?
A party to a dispute will learn 3 lessons, often too late.
Mm-hmm.
Records. And records.
I like that. We're going to have to put that as the tagline to this episode when it goes out.
It's technically the importance of records, but we just, life's too short.
We'll fill in between the lines as people get into the episode.
Yeah, and I want to make it digitized, organized, navigable records. But yeah, that's not very catchy. Anyway, I was fired from marketing.
I appreciate your candor on that. It all comes together. We're going to have a good conversation on that point later anyway. So artificial intelligence is a buzz everywhere right now. And I'm curious to understand if you have any thoughts on the role this may or may not play in the world of claims and contract disputes.
Yeah. I said this yesterday, and Sarah said, "Well, people in hell want ice water, but I want the AI to basically identify, the variance between deliverables and the various teams. Right now, you're using Navisworks. You're doing coordination that way. When I started my career, we were doing it with light tables and paper documents, and they would just overlay and sign things and agree things that way. So you can see it's really developed as it's gone along. And the idea now, and you get a lot of this with IPD, where you have the contractor finish documents. And so you have the designer who's responsible for intent, making sure that there's a certain number of CFMs coming into the room. And how it gets there is up to the contractor. And what you're starting to see now is the single lines are handed off to the contractor, and then the contractor finishes them, and it becomes the shop drawings. Now that's a perfect kind of smooth effort to do, and I can see AI kind of helping with that. And I think we also have heard this the conference that the idea of ongoing value engineering, because the experts are out there either as the AI or as the folks knowing how much things cost, how much it's going to cost to install, if there's something better out there. And I think that's taking the delegated design idea and kind of embedding it into the program. So now when an architect is designing something, they get 3 or 4 different options in terms of putting things together. So those are the things that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, you're thinking more about the design and the opportunity.
Yeah, because I like to go ahead rather than the claims. It's finding out who's throwing the babies in the river before, before we actually have to pull the babies out.
Well, it's not me. Just to be clear, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking forward to is getting ahead of all of this, so that it kind of puts me out of business in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, if the industry does its job well with AI, then hopefully, we should be semi-redundant, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, I think I work backwards from whenever I think about AI. I think, well, we've got these massive challenges in life. Everyone is going to have to think about climate change. Everyone's going to have to think about healthcare, musculoskeletal issues, us sitting at desks all the time, sat like a prawn for sometimes 12 hours a day and, not speaking to our families. It's not good for us. How do we work more efficiently? How do we get home on time, or ideally work even less? So what I would like to see from AI is all of our disconnected data as we have it, for it all to be connected. So you're working in the model, you have a clash you can't resolve. That then could be escalated within one platform onto an early warning tracker that could then it would automatically notify the relevant people from the client. So if you do MEP, it'll go to the package manager. Imagine that situation where you're not doing all disconnected, opening up 10 different bits of software to log this issue. And if it automatically starts thinking how to resolve it, right? That would be great. And getting all the records on site. I mean, again, the thing I like about open space is that you have the design in the model right next to what's happening on site, so you can work back and forth. But I'm hoping AI, well, I think they're working with, I've forgotten who they're working with, Disperse, I think, to start thinking about tracking so using those site records and doing the progress at the same time.
That's cool.
So cool, right? Because think how many project managers walk around a building site, kind of do a red amber green or use Primavera, try and log what's on the critical path. And, actually it's not a very effective use of their time, right? This is just a paperwork exercise. If the computers were doing that with us, and of course a competent professional checking what they're doing.
There's some validation mixed in it.
Yeah, exactly. So whether that be sampling or, oversight, whatever we want to call it, that project manager could then be thinking about, okay, well, how do we make this more environmentally friendly? How do we make this project safer? What are the other issues we need to deal with here?
I like that because they're not as in the weeds, but still able to go in and do that sanity check and think bigger picture. And it's always the challenge in any type of work that we're doing when you're tied to so many manual processes, whether it's just the administrative side of things or you're playing with the scheduling or anything else. It's a matter of, I'm so tired or focused on all of these small things that need to happen that, gosh, it is really hard for me to think 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 2 years down the line into this ideal state. And I agree completely. I think that augmentation is really where AI is going to have a bit of a sweet spot in that it's going to hopefully streamline and augment the work that we do in a way that has a very positive impact, and we can all go home a little bit earlier than we have in the past.
And be more efficient, because everyone knows how productivity still sucks in construction.
Yeah. But like, I mean, there's no, we were saying the other day, like I just said to you, like there's no button in Revit or Navisworks that says this design was done with reasonable skill and care.
Yeah.
But actually with AI, you're going to start to see we're going to be able to start thinking about were clashes resolved within a timely manner. Of course, I don't want anyone to be using technology to beat each other up. You know, these records are still going to be very subjective, still going to need human intervention to think about. But there's no single button that says this is going to be fit for purpose. But hopefully, if we think Revit in 10 years' time, maybe it'll start coming up with design suggestions and saying, can't cantilever this that far, and you know it'll ruin all the architects' lives when you try and build something that isn't feasible, right?
That's right.
And like, who knows if it could be that connected, then you know maybe we're sat in Revit in 10 years' time and it's telling us the costs and if we plug in our location, it may be able to tell us how much concrete is per cubic meter.
Yep, that's right.
Or yard, whatever. How do you measure it here?
Cubic yard.
Okay.
The joys of working across international borders and the
Paying in
bizarre
Prussian
way that
francs.
the United States manages all of our measurements or units of measurement.
That's right. 2x4s.
England can't. Don't throw stones in glass houses. Great Britain.
No comments on my end here. Well, I've got one final question for both of you before I let you get back into your busy mornings. Cliff, could you tell me what is one tool that you're going to use on any project, no matter what you're working on?
I always like to, because I've worked on projects for so many years, I've always wanted to kind of identify it's not a single tool, but it's an understanding how that projects are complex systems. And if we try to manage them, you know, through a hierarchy of layering and saying you must do this, you can't do that, you have to stay within your domain boundaries. The architect has to remain the design professional. The contractor has to remain the builder. When you get on site and you're actually building these things, you're not able to kind of use all of the talent that's available on a project. What I've found over the years is that as a complex system, some of folks involved are larger than some of their parts. So I've been on tons of projects where people have said, you know, this project has a life of its own, and you want to say that's great because it means that the parties have organized, self-organized, they've emerged, they have this whole behavior that they're focusing on the project and making sure that it gets done and focusing on the mission, rather than saying, sorry, I can't do that because I'm the electrical contractor, I'm not the mechanical contractor, I'm not the designer. And what I found from a lot of my projects, because people come and go, is that you would just allow these teams to emerge and do things and become part of the mission. And I think, that's what obviously IPD is doing, is making everyone part of the mission. And we're not just building a hospital, as I always like to say, but we're actually changing the face of healthcare. And that's the tool. And that's more of the soft tool than saying, you're going to use Revit and we're going to pass it off to the builders, and they're going to they're not even going to use Navisworks. They're just going to finish things in Revit, and then we're going to do their pay apps based on all of that, because that becomes just a tool for doing those types of things, rather than allowing the teams to kind of do what they do best.
I'm not surprised that you are an investigator based on that answer there. Just how in the weeds and how you take a look at all these different
very
projects.
much in the weeds.
Yeah, it's good though. I appreciate that answer. I think that's the first time we've gone down that particular rabbit hole.
Yeah, right.
And we often end up with like tape measure, axle, or determination. So we're all over the map.
These old guys on their knees with tape measures on concrete floors.
Hey, I've got like 4 or 5 tape measures spread across my house.
There
So
you go.
I'm in the tape measure camp as well.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Sarah, what's one tool you bring to every project?
Yeah. So I don't actually get to select the tools that we use. Really, again, it depends on the evidence.
But if you could.
But if I could, I'll caveat this. If I could, I would walk right now over to the Matterport and Open Space, and there's another product there, I can't remember what it is, all the site records, because they're just a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? but not if you can't see who did it, where.
Not if it's not time stamped. Yeah.
And yeah,
Geolocated.
yeah, geolocated, timestamped, everything.
Yeah.
And, over there. And there's more fiscally achievable tools like PlanGrid, it's great.
I'm a fan. I joined Autodesk via the PlanGrid acquisition, so thank you for that
There you
answer.
go.
I love both your answers, and I very much enjoyed this conversation. I know I joked at the beginning of nobody wants to be in this claims and contracts dispute, and that's largely true, but I think you've done a wonderful job of unpacking why a lot of this happens and how folks can hopefully mitigate it if it does, or prevent it from happening by records, and a whole lot of other really thoughtful approaches as we kind of get into this. So thank you both for spending some time with me this morning. I know you're both super busy.
Yeah.
And for everybody out there listening, if you haven't figured this out, you are listening to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I am surrounded by cameras and lights and other fancy stuff for a very good reason, so make sure you go and check that out. And until the next time, thank you so much, and goodbye.